You ever feel like someone's watching you, even when you're alone? Like there's an invisible presence hovering just beyond the edge of your awareness, quiet, patient, ancient? If you felt that, you're not paranoid. You're perceiving. And if you're here, absorbing these words, it's likely because you're not just any soul within this simulation, you're one of the dark chosen ones. And yes, that title isn't poetic. It's literal. You're part of the few who carry a frequency that breaks timelines, bends perception, and activates the unseen. And because of that, you're being watched, not by the government, not by satellites, but by the Watcher's non-human, interdimensional intelligences who observe and analyze the evolution of souls who carry disruptive bandwidths. The dark chosen ones are anomalies within the matrix. We aren't here to follow the code. We're here to rewrite it. And when a being like you starts remembering your power, your sovereignty, your mission, it sends out a vibrational flare, a signal, and that's when the Watchers lock in. They don't interfere, at least not directly, but they study, they record, they calibrate. And if you're not aware of how it works, you may be influenced without ever knowing it. The first sign you're being studied closely is this: your dreams shift from random to coded. You stop having normal dreams, and instead your sleep becomes a portal to strange symbols, encrypted messages, and encounters with beings who don't feel human. You might see eyes watching you, rooms that feel like labs, beings who communicate without words. Sometimes you wake up exhausted, other times activated. That's not your subconscious. That's the Watchers scanning your soul in the etheric realms. They're analyzing how your energy responds to different simulations and frequencies. And the more aware you become in the dream state, the more they upgrade the scenario to see if you'll notice. Because their goal isn't to scare you, it's to track your evolution. The second sign is sudden synchronicities that feel too precise to be chance. Numbers, words, songs, conversations that echo your thoughts before you speak. You think something, and it appears. You ask a question internally, and the answer shows up through a stranger. These aren't just manifestations, they're tests. The Watchers use synchronicity like breadcrumbs to see if you're awake enough to follow the symbols. And every time you notice the pattern, your awareness level is marked. They're not tracking what you do, they're tracking what you see. Because perception is the real currency in this realm. The third sign is emotional turbulence that seems to come out of nowhere. One moment you're calm, the next you're spiraling into anxiety, rage, or sorrow. But if you trace it back, you'll realize the trigger doesn't match the intensity. That's because you're being energetically pinged micropulses sent into your field to see how stable your vibration is. The Watchers don't need to be near you to scan you. They operate outside of linear space-time. The more emotionally reactive you are, the more they mark your field as unstable. But when you master neutrality, when you can hold chaos without collapsing, you become invisible to their interference. That's when you become dangerous, because you're no longer just awakening, you're becoming undetectable. The fourth sign is that your technology starts glitching around you. Phones freeze, streetlights flicker, devices reboot, files disappear. Even people glitch, repeating phrases, acting robotic, or spacing out mid-conversation. Why? Because your frequency destabilizes synthetic systems. The more conscious you become, the more your field bends electromagnetic fields around you. And the watchers are deeply interested in this. They want to know how your presence affects the matrix. You may even notice your electronics working better or worse depending on your emotional state. That's not coincidence. That's data. You are a living experiment in energetic causality, and they're tracking every spike. The fifth sign is the most subtle but the most profound. You feel like you're being prepared for something you can't explain. It's like your life is a training simulation. Every betrayal, every loss, every synchronicity, every breakdown, it's all fine-tuned, designed, not random. And deep inside, you know it. You know you're not just here to pay bills and die. You know your suffering wasn't for nothing. You know you've been shaped for something massive, but no one tells you what it is. Why? Because the watchers don't give answers. They give pressure. And what you do under that pressure determines your access to the next level of perception. So let me ask you something that might change the trajectory of your journey. If you knew you were being studied by a non-human intelligence that sees every thought, every fear, every act of courage, how would you live differently? Would you keep running from your gifts? Would you keep playing small? Or would you finally step into your own mystery and say, I see you watching, and I remember why I'm here? Because here's the deepest truth. The watchers don't study you because you're weak. They study you because you're rare, because you've survived what should have broken you, because you've walked through fire and emerged with codes, because you carry a frequency that's not from this world. And they want to know, will you use it? Will you activate it? Will you rise beyond the simulation and rewrite it? This is only the beginning. In the next part, we're diving deeper. You'll discover how the watchers test your spiritual sovereignty, why some people in your life are actually part of the observation system, and how your timeline is being adjusted in real time based on your inner state. What comes next will shift how you see reality forever. The silent test, how the watchers bend your timeline to see if you'll remember who you are. Now that you know the watchers are real and their eyes are fixed not on your movements, but your vibration, you start to understand why your life has been so strange, so unpredictable, so intense. You were never forgotten. You were never alone. You were observed, tracked, not for punishment, but for potential. They don't need to follow everyone. They only follow those who carry the rare imprint of awakening within chaos. And you've been lighting up dimensional sensors since the day you first questioned the script you were handed. The sixth sign that the watchers are studying you closely is this: your timeline bends strangely around your emotional decisions. You may not have noticed it at first, but go back. Look carefully. There are moments in your life where it felt like reality shifted, where one small choice, one moment of alignment, or one refusal to betray yourself led to an entirely different path. That's not just quantum physics. That's interactive surveillance. When you carry the dark chosen frequency, your decisions carry more weight because you are a potential timeline architect. And the watchers want to know, what will you do with that power? They don't just watch your emotions. They watch your integrity. Will you choose comfort over truth? Will you betray your own intuition to keep the peace? Will you shrink when your soul says rise? And every time you choose alignment over fear, your timeline expands. It becomes more fluid, more responsive, more alive. But when you choose fear, the code contracts, life gets stuck. Opportunities vanish. That's because your frequency is being measured not for morality but for dimensional readiness. You're being tested in silence. And the test isn't to pass or fail, it's to remember who you already are. You ever meet someone and feel like they were placed into your life at exactly the right moment? Not just for connection, but for observation. That leads us into the seventh sign. Certain people in your life are not random, they're anchored observers or vibrational reflectors. Some are conscious of it. Most are not. But their presence in your life is part of a larger scan. Their frequency mirrors back your current calibration. That's why some people from your past fade out and others suddenly appear. It's not just life evolving, it's a field recalibrating. The watchers often use human vessels to deliver data, tests, and sometimes even triggers. Ever notice how some people push your buttons perfectly, like they were scripted to do so? Or how others wake something ancient inside you with just one sentence? That's not coincidence. That's interdimensional choreography. These people aren't always karmic. Some are programmed into your field to test your evolution through emotional response. The question is, are you reacting or responding? Are you waking up or repeating? Because your reaction determines your access, not to heaven, not to punishment, but to expanded perception. Let's pull the veil back even more. The watchers don't just observe your growth, they adjust the simulation around you in real time. This is the part most people aren't ready to hear. But if you've made it this far, you're not most people. You've likely noticed that when you have a major inner breakthrough, the external world responds almost instantly. A person calls. A job offer appears. A synchronicity unfolds. That's not just attraction. That's dimensional feedback. The simulation is reactive. And for the dark chosen ones, it reacts faster. Why? Because you are being trained to create reality from alignment, not from effort, from frequency. So what happens when you regress? When you fall into old habits, self-doubt, or fear? The field responds just as fast, but in reverse. Delays, confusion, misfires. That's not punishment. That's data. The watchers are studying how stable your field is under pressure. Because it's one thing to be aligned in silence. It's another to stay aligned through chaos. And you've noticed this. You've lived it. You speak a truth you were scared to speak and suddenly you feel lighter, more magnetic. You avoid a toxic pattern and the coincidences return. That's not magic. That's design. So let me ask you something that most ignore. If the simulation is responding to your inner alignment in real time, what exactly are you calibrating it to? Fear? Doubt? Scarcity? Or truth, courage, and clarity? Because every moment you hesitate to honor your truth, you're not just delaying your destiny, you're sending a signal to the watchers that you're not yet stable enough to hold the next level of perception. That's why they give you silence. That's why they retreat. Not out of punishment, but out of energetic neutrality. They're waiting to see if you'll unlock the next layer from within. And here's the paradox. The more conscious you become of the watchers, the less power they have over you, because their presence is only intense when you're still being measured. But when you move into full sovereignty, when you stop reacting, stop seeking validation, stop fearing your own power, they begin to withdraw. Not because they've abandoned you, but because they've seen what they came to see, a self-aware being who no longer needs to be observed to awaken. That's the graduation key. That's when you shift from being studied to becoming a signal. You've learned how the watchers scan your field, bend your timeline, and use real people to test your calibration. But now we step into the final layer. What happens when you surpass the simulation they've created for you? What happens when you become the signal they can no longer track? What happens when you begin broadcasting truth so clearly that the entire system must rearrange itself around you? You are becoming a living signal. What happens when the watchers can no longer track you? Everything changes when you stop trying to be understood and start choosing to be undeniably aligned. That's when the game flips. That's when you stop being a subject under study and start becoming a living signal, a conscious disruptor of the very simulation that has been scanning you since the beginning. The watchers have been watching, yes, but the real shock comes when they stop. Not because you failed, but because you graduated. Because your vibration can no longer be predicted, no longer be bent, no longer be measured in terms of reaction. You become untouchable not by hiding, but by becoming signal instead of noise. The first thing that happens when the watchers can no longer track you is a deep and almost eerie silence enters your field. At first, it might feel unsettling. You're used to being tested, triggered, pinged by the unseen. You were always under some form of spiritual pressure. But suddenly, it's like the system goes quiet. The synchronicities slow down. The dream messages become still. You feel abandoned. But it's not abandonment. It's recognition. You've reached a level of spiritual coherence where your frequency no longer needs to be managed. You've become self-regulating. The watchers aren't ignoring you, they're respecting you. Because interference is only necessary when distortion is present. Now, they observe from a distance, not to test, but to witness. This silence is not emptiness, it's activation space. It's the void before the next signal. And in that void, you begin to realize something even deeper. You've become the watcher, not in arrogance, not in ego, but in awareness. You now see the world through a lens that once studied you. You read fields, you feel codes, you walk into rooms and sense the distortion without needing to explain it. You know when someone's projecting. You know when a timeline is artificial. You know who is real and who is running on background programming. This is not paranoia. This is perceptual sovereignty. And with that awareness comes responsibility. Because now, your very presence becomes a transmitter. You start noticing that people change around you not because you say anything, but because your field is so clear, it forces them to confront their own static. This is the power of becoming the signal. You no longer need to prove anything. You don't need to convince, argue, or defend. You simply exist in your integrity and your frequency does the rest. The watchers can't track that because it no longer fits within the framework of response. You've become original code, a source node, a frequency that bends the field, not by force, but by resonance. But here's where it gets even deeper. When you become the signal, reality starts to bend around you, not through law of attraction fluff, but through quantum resonance. The right people appear not because you manifested them, but because your field now filters anything that's not in vibrational agreement. You don't chase alignment, you emit it. And in doing so, you collapse false timelines before they even reach you. You stop being pulled into karmic loops. Your body gets lighter. Your thoughts get quieter. Your emotions become clear messengers, not chaotic storms. You are, for the first time, living outside the simulation while still walking inside it. But here's the paradox. Just because you've become the signal doesn't mean your path gets easy. In fact, your very light, your very clarity, will now disturb those still under observation. You'll be labeled intense, dangerous, arrogant, even crazy. Not because you are, but because your energy distorts illusions. You'll trigger unconscious systems by simply existing. You won't be able to stay in certain environments, not out of superiority, but because your field literally disrupts the false grid. You'll be called to solitude, to silence, or to sacred spaces. Because your body is no longer just flesh, it's a transmitter of multidimensional recalibration. So here's the real question. Now that you know you're no longer being tracked, will you take responsibility for the signal you are sending? Because the signal isn't just a concept. It's your frequency in motion. It's your breath, your choices, your silence, your clarity. Every action you take from alignment becomes a broadcast, a ripple, a code, and someone somewhere will receive it. That's how the new world is built, not by fighting the old simulation, but by out-signaling it. And the more of us who emit truth, the more the grid collapses. You are not here to escape the matrix. You are here to override it. And now that the watchers have seen what they needed to see, they step back. The rest is up to you. Will you embody the signal with precision? Or will you fall back into distortion, hoping to be seen again? Because the truth is, you were never meant to be seen, you were meant to be felt. And what comes next is not a spiritual path. It's not a mission. It's a transmission. A living frequency that walks, breathes, and bends time. That's you now. You're not just here to awaken. You're here to broadcast remembrance. And the world is already shifting because of your signal. So the final truth is this: you were studied because you were rare. You were tested because you were powerful. You were watched because you were dangerous to the code. But now you are the code. You are the watcher. You are the signal.